that of what's coming out of the Commission of Inquiry into state capture. The chairperson there, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, saying the inquiry will apply to the High Court for an extension of its lifespan for a further 3 months. Now, what we have been doing is taking a look back and completing the picture of what we have heard in 2020. Joining me for that conversation, Newzroom Afrika reporter Tumalo Mhlaudi, legal expert, advocate Budidi Mamanya, as well as Zen Mate from Open Secrets.
Based on the assumptions which no longer obtain as we speak. And definitely the commission needs more time. It needs to be thorough. It's not a simple process. As you can see, the commission has to accommodate all affected interests in its work.
Now, the question becomes, as we're talking now, I think the commission is well costing us about 700 million and is expected that at the end of it we'll be on the other side of $1 billion. Is that money justified? Is that money well spent?
Well, there are two things that we need to take into account. The first is the actual economic loss that we have suffered, both in terms of rent value of money lost in this corruption and what has transpired, but also direct economic loss, the impact on the economy. But I don't know what price we want to attach to protecting our constitutional democracy, because the whole idea of this commission is to vindicate our constitutional framework. So we may be tempted to look at it in terms of monetary terms, but we may pay a more heavier price in the future. Obviously, in the context of the economic and financial constraints that we have, that looks like a lot of money. But where I see it, the commission has thus far done quite some substantially good work, and we should pay the price for some of our own failures as the public in relation to what has transpired.
We'll track some of that substantially good work that we have seen in this year, 2020. But Zen, let me bring you in here. It's, I suppose, the second... It's the third, probably, extension now of the commission. It's beginning in some quarters to say, well, maybe President Jacob Zuma, former President Jacob Zuma, was correct to say the scope of this commission is too broad.
No, hi, thank you for having me. And just to say, with the commission's now new extension, I think the commission made it very clear that it lost 3 vital months to have hearings at the outbreak of the pandemic and with the closure on the lockdown. And so the commission gave a very good and understandable reasons as to why they were asking for an extension this time around, and to say that they're asking for 3 months. And because this is the time that they lost when lockdown began. And so this is the 3 months that they are now requesting. And I think when the commission restarted during lockdown, they were very clear to say that they are narrowing their focus and narrowing the focus on the terms of reference. And I think we see that now. And the main thing now with this extension, we see that the commission has time to call the private sector actors that were vital enablers to state capture. And we now press the commission with this new extension to do exactly that.
All right, let's talk then key witnesses that are still to appear before the Commission of Inquiry. Tumalo, former President Jacob Zuma being one of them, yes, who of course has made it very clear where he sits on this particular matter. But Nonkululeko Mukonyani is still to appear before the Commission. Why is she appearing?
Well, she has a lot to answer to if you look at what revelations were made in the Bosasa stream of evidence. She already stood her ground at the Commission of Inquiry earlier this year, saying that in terms of Angelo Agrizi and others pinpointing certain blame to her in terms of irregularities and contracts that Bosasa won because she was thrown birthday parties, that is all, hogwash as far as Nonkululeko Mukonyani is concerned. However, when the evidence leaders pushed her a little bit, there were certain contradictions that appeared to come from her testimony. Now, why she is important is because of her high profile, and she, of course, held various senior positions in provincial government and in national government, and it shows the Commission's determination and commitment to say that no matter who you are, if you are former President Jacob Zuma, and now we have the current President, Cyril Ramaphosa, also expected to come and lead evidence, you have to come and account, and you will account. We saw how Dudu Myeni famously, was saying that she reserves the right not to comment,
Yes.
but she was still participating.
She says a typical example of stonewalling. Advocate Mudidi Mamanye, let me bring you in as Tumalo raises that very same question. You've got a sitting president who previously was the deputy president when, I suppose, some of these transactions that we're hearing at the Commission of Inquiry were happening. As the sitting president, he has committed to appearing before the commission next year sometime, while the former president is seemingly non-committal on that particular question. And how does that play out and how does it look? But also, does the current president have things to answer to?
Well, firstly, I think the current president in particular doesn't have much choice. His party, the African National Congress, has made it very clear that they fully support the commission and its work. As the leader of the ANC, he cannot undermine that position of his political party. So for that reason alone, he will be obliged to cooperate with the commission and attend. But secondly, he has said himself that he will do so without any compulsion. And that is commendable, because then we don't have to see the drama that we have seen with the former president. But obviously, as you understand, the commission operates on the basis of people who are implicated and or who are relevant to providing evidence to the commission. And to the extent that there are matters where the current president is implicated and or is capable of assisting the commission, then he will have to appear before the commission. So it could be for one or the other reason why he must appear before the commission. But the commission wouldn't just call him because he's a high-profile person, he's the president. There would be a reason for why he must appear before the commission.
Right. Some shocking testimony that we have heard at the Commission of Inquiry this year, that of what's coming out of the Commission of Inquiry into state capture. The chairperson there, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, saying the inquiry will apply to the High Court for an extension of its lifespan for a further 3 months. Now, what we have been doing is taking a look back and completing the picture of what we have heard in 2020. Joining me for that conversation, Newzroom Afrika reporter Tumalo Mhlaudi, legal expert, advocate Mudidi Mamanye, as well as Zen Mate from Open Secrets. Let's talk about what we've heard, Tumalo, this year at the Commission of Inquiry. First and foremost, Musabenzi Zwane was at the commission. He pleaded pretty much ignorance. And what's important about that, Thabo, is the fact that in his position, he had to oversee various contracts that were dealing with the housing department as MEC, the rolling out of RDP houses, which is one of government's biggest priorities. Not knowing the legislation that governs that is something that opens the department up to abuse, as we had seen before the Commission of Inquiry, contracts being signed, pre-approval of payments, and some of those service providers, in fact, majority of them, then up and disappeared with the money and no service delivery happened. So it speaks to the issue of accountability again. If he at that level could say with a stone face before the Commission of Inquiry that he did not know about the legislation that governed how these processes were then rolled out, what happens when you go further up and sideways in the state machinery? Advocate Mudidi, how is this likely going to affect the outcomes, the recommendations, the report of the commission? An MEC who's saying, at the time, I really wasn't aware of the Housing Act. I might have known about the PFMA, but quite honestly, I had people who were directors or advisors in my department who knew about the Housing Act. I didn't really know much about it.
Look, I must say I would be very sympathetic to anybody in that type of trouble expressing that type of ignorance. I don't necessarily believe that he didn't know, but obviously he may be trying to find a way to extricate himself out of that. Nevertheless, ignorance of the law is not an excuse, so he cannot naturally go and say I was an MEC for housing and did not even know the legal regulatory framework that governs my powers. I'm sure he has used that same act for something else somewhere along the line. But also the administration in state departments is designed in such a way that it provides overall specialized support to the political head. So the idea that he claims not to know, obviously, I just take that with a pinch of salt. I think he's in trouble. He needs to explain. But I think the understanding of the mandate of the commission is that it's going to have to make findings, particularly on more policy issues and how the accountability should be dealt with arising out of the information that it has. But I think separately, we must not think that the law enforcement agencies are not watching with keen interest the developments that are happening. And I have no doubt that with the information that is coming, and it's through the commission, which is giving very clear pointers and indicators, and I think that is one of the fundamental successes of this commission, is that it has actually assisted to get people to come out of the woodworks and to come and talk about what they know and what has happened. So I have no doubt that the police service is hard at work. I mean, I think the Hawks are very busy as we speak, putting together. So we might think it's a surprise, but we will get a few people getting arrested even before the commission files its report.
Now, Zan, you mentioned earlier on some corporations beginning to account for their complicity in the state capture project. Corporations like McKinsey and company committing to repay a small portion of their fortunes that they got out of the state capture project. Should corporations be forced maybe to even meaningfully account? Because some of them pretty much kind of act as if, well, we were just really victims of what was already happening and we took advantage of it, but we were not really part of the planning of this whole campaign.
No, absolutely. I think no one can say that paying back the money isn't a huge step towards trying to put the country back together. But it is very clear that paying the money is not enough. These companies have done huge damage to the country. And to just simply let them get away with what ends up being for the company and a budgeted cost for them is not enough. We need these corporations to come forward and to be held accountable. It is not enough for them to calculate the risk of doing damage to the country and ultimately ripping the fabric of the society apart, and to calculate that risk and budget for it, and to know that at the end of the day it's going to be a ticket item that they can pay off. The Zondo Commission has the power to call these corporations that enabled the capture to effectively to happen in this country, and to make it efficient, to make it a machinery without which it would not have been able to be without these big companies, your law firms, your consultancies, your big banks. These are the companies that need to come forward. And yes, paying back the money is a big step, but it is not enough. They need to come and be held accountable. The Commission is a public fact-finding body, and part of being held accountable is for these corporations to come and be asked the tough questions that the public deserves to know. And through this process, this becomes part of public record, and an important public record in our country.
Now, talking about companies and big sums of money, the 1.6 billion rand prepayment to Tegeta has also been key focus. You got Susan Daniels, head of legal, coming to the commission saying, well, I was instructed by the CEO, Koko Matsela, at the time to write memorandum to the board around this prepayment. And Koko saying, I distance myself completely from that memorandum, had nothing to do with it.
Absolutely. That was almost a formula, almost a script of how the issue of responsibility and shifting blame became a narrative at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. You would have a whistleblower, and you would have the principal who would then point the finger either at someone else or throw the ball back in the court of the whistleblower, saying, well, I never knew that it was within my realm of responsibility. So again, it speaks to the issue of trying to dodge the bullet, but I think it's not that simple, because in certain key areas of management and responsibility, there are certain targets and certain powers that compel a person to act. Ignorance is not an excuse. So when you hear this at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, it boggles the mind. I ask myself the question, is the person sitting there fully cognizant of what they're saying, or are they just reacting to a question with the hope that the commission will let it, slip away and they will walk away scot-free.
Yeah. Advocate Mdima, that he said, she said kind of situation where you've got one witness that comes to the commission and says, well, this is how it happened. The CEO advised that I should write that memorandum, and the CEO coming and say, well, that's not a lie. I distanced myself from that memorandum. I never actually said that should happen. You did that with Salim Essa, and that was actually your own doing. How does this commission sift through that kind of information?
Well, obviously, the one reality that we must accept is that there has been an environment which has been created where even very decent people have become very indecent in these equations. Many people have lost their jobs for saying no to this nonsense of this type of instructions. And therefore, sometimes we must be very cautious when people say, well, I was instructed, because in the entire system of corruption and malfeasance is based on instilling fear like any criminal activity. So the criminals who are the corruption masters instill fear, they are brutal, and a lot of other decent, very good civil servants have suffered immensely as a result. And some people have had to do things that they ordinarily would not do. Having said that, they still stand to account and vindicate their own honor insofar as this matter is concerned. Part of what they will have to do is to come clean and actually explain. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of them will be able to demonstrate that indeed they acted under some or the other form of duress in doing what they did. Now, if you look at the fact that we have had evidence up to the highest office in the land about things that were happening, ministers, powerful political figures and leaders are implicated in these matters, and you have a small person that is supposed to say no. It is not necessarily, I can talk from personal experience. It's not actually easy in such a dangerous environment to simply say no. We know of instances where witnesses disappear. People have been killed in the line of duty. Now, and I think where I agree with my colleague is that we need full accountability, whether it's private sector. We have seen some big audit firms being central to the destruction of this country. In fact, I'm not sure why this type of entities that give us these peanuts called 1.6 billion, where they have caused immense damage, not just to the economy of the country, but to human life. And they have actuated gross violations of human rights through their corruption, must get off the hook and must continue to do business in the Republic of South Africa. And I think we need more harsher measures. And I agree that even if they don't appear or they are not brought before the Zondo Commission, the law enforcement agencies and the government must take even more firmer measures. There has been numerous allegations of corruption and collusion in the private sector alone. I think at the moment our obsession and preoccupation is the public sector, but there has been extensive corruption in the space of the private sector alone. There's collusion in pricing. There are all sorts of things. The outflows of monies from the Republic is a private sector activity in the main.
Yeah.
And in any event, in corruption, the definition of corruption is broad enough to cover those that says, well, we needed the tender. Because most of the big companies like McKinsey is a big international global entity that should not even be participating in this thing. And I think there's a fundamental question also about the loyalty of some of these international organizations to the Republic of South Africa and her people.
You want to jump in here?
Yes, yeah. And I think it's very important what the advocate has said there, because I think in terms of the testimony that's come out, I'll put my neck on the line here. I think the intention didn't perhaps mirror the outcome. You had a situation, and you still have a situation, given our very painful past from apartheid, where the majority of the country's population, the black population, is still very underrepresented in the economy. So you have a situation where you have officials in government who say that they want to empower. Let's look at the Free State housing debacle, for instance, the prepayments, and they prioritized youth, women, and people with disabilities. This is all very honorable. But then this is where it gets cynical and the problem comes in, then all of a sudden those people that have been identified and earmarked and processes are written off, those people then have to then pay the people or the gatekeepers who opened the door for them. This is where that fine line between corruption and emancipation and empowerment becomes a problem. And I think the Commission of Inquiry has gone a long way to shine the spotlight on this very, very interesting contradiction.
Talking about shining the spotlight, Zen, I'll give you this final word. Talk to us about crimes that have been committed and the prosecutions that we need to see. Speaking about that asbestos project in particular, we have seen some arrests, particularly following testimony coming out of the Commission of Inquiry.
No, absolutely. I think as the guests here have fully said, that one of the important parts of this commission has been the collaboration with the national prosecuting authorities and other criminal justice agencies in this country to take the work of the commission forward. And in the instance that the commission is unable to see certain witnesses or to hear certain evidences, it's been able to share the research and investigative evidence it's been accumulating with these state prosecution bodies to be able to take these matters forward. And I think in the crimes that we have seen in particular, again, highlighting the role of the private sector, as my colleagues have said, in such a disproportionate country with such disproportionate wealth. The role of the private sector in South Africa and the role it has played in state capture and in enabling state capture has been big. And I mean, for example, F&B and Standard Bank need to come to account for the role that they played in the Free State and the Sina Dairy Farm project. And that's, and for example, Bain and Company is a huge consultancy firm that crippled SARS. And crippling SARS is something that we as a country have to bear the brunt of for years to come. A reputable tax agency that was amongst the top in the world is now having to rebuild itself because private corporations such as Bain and Company came into this country and wreaked havoc with SARS, along with KPMG. And what we see with vast increases in our economy, now the SARS are struggling to bring in billions. You see in there a corporation and crimes that are, who bears the brunt of those crimes of a company that has now issued a public apology and paid back money. What the brunt of that is the people of this country. Those are the kind of crimes that the economic crimes that we as a country have to bear, and they affect the most vulnerable in our society and us as a general public. And so it's essential that public accountability is sought after by the Zondo Commission and together with the National Prosecuting Authority and other prosecuting authorities in this country, because we are the ones and those the most vulnerable who bear the brunt of what's been happening.
Right, Zen, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. That's Zen there from Open Secrets. Advocate Mudima Manye, appreciate your time. As always, a pleasure having you on. And Damalo, great work, man, for the year. We didn't even touch on half the things that we need to still talk about. There's Advocate Dalim Mpofu's performance. There is, of course, Dudu Biedi exposing the Mr. X.
Mr. X.
The agenda of Mr. X.
Going against the direct instruction.
Right. So there's a whole lot more that happened this year. But, of course, time always the enemy. But I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
All right.